welcome to this SheClicks webinar about using Olympus Live Composite Mode. I'm Angela Nicholson and I'm the founder of SheClicks. This SheClicks webinar is sponsored by Olympus, empowering consumers and professionals alike with innovative digital cameras, lenses, audio recorders and binoculars. Olympus's precision optics and groundbreaking technology open up new possibilities for capturing life's most precious moments. For more information, visit olympus.co.uk. So thank you very much to Olympus for sponsoring tonight. Tonight's webinar is presented by Clare Harvey-May from Olympus UK. She's a very experienced and accomplished photographer, and she's a mine of technical information. And I've known her for a heck of a long time. And she's really great at explaining all sorts of aspects of photography and particularly Olympus cameras. So Claire, welcome to SheClicks webinar.
Hey, Ange, how you doing? How are you? Thank you so
really
much.
Good. You're very welcome.
Lovely
really
introduction.
You're very welcome, because you've been part of SheClicks from just before it was SheClicks, really, just as it was going live, and you invited loads and loads of people, and so you've been here from the very beginning and a really staunch supporter. So it's great to have you here doing a webinar.
100%. I mean, a bit like yourself, Andrew, we've been in this trade a long time. I think I'm on my 36th year in the photographic trade. And when I first started, there were very few women around. When we did camera club talks, it was the women that made the tea, which was very frustrating. So I've sort of fought for my place fairly hard. And when you sort of made the group, and it was so good. And I still invite people now, people that, not many people, to be fair, that don't know about the group, but on my travels and on my sort of, little trips, not that I'm out much, I always mention it. And I'm always saying, do you know about SheClicks? Do you know about SheClicks? And I think, firstly, congratulations, because it's just such a phenomenon. You've done so well with it. And power to the girls, right? Power to the girl photographers. That's what I think.
Thanks. They're such a nice group of people. I think everybody just understands what it's about and really gets on with it and enjoys their photography and supporting and helping each other, which is really nice.
Oh yeah, I mean, and let's not diss the other half of the world. Let's not put them down. But
that's not what about.
No, it isn't 100%. But joining a community where there's love and there's good criticism, and everybody wants everybody else to get on. That is what it's all about. It's not about egos, and it's so lovely, honestly. Whenever I can dip in and look at some of the Facebook posts and some of the Instagram posts, there's always good stuff. It's just such a feel-good site. So well done, and keep it up.
Thank you very much. I'll do my best. So, live composite mode. It's one of those really clever features that's actually been around for quite a long time now. And I think I said to you earlier, I think if you're a novice photographer, then you kind of go with the flow. But if you're an experienced photographer, it's like, what? How does it do that? But it is so useful, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's one of those features because, it's funny because on previous models, live composite, you say composite and I say composite, you say tomato, I say tomato. It used to be buried. It was buried in the sort of mode dial under manual, way past your 6-second exposure. So it was never something that was obvious, and although we used to use it and I still use it and still love it, it wasn't sort of something shouted about. And I don't know if that's a marketing thing or whatever, but now obviously we've changed the way the cameras look, because we've taken off some of the features on top of the top end models, like the art mode, and we've replaced it with B, and the B button obviously is the long exposure button. So it's much easier to find, and people are coming across it much more simply, and it's not buried like it was before, which is yay, joy, thankfully. So it's been around forever.
Do you use it a lot?
So I use it all the time, and we are in live composite sort of time of year, to be fair. Like late mornings, late dark mornings, late early dark nights, and you've got so much little daytime at the moment, and nobody really wants to shoot in sort of top sort of daytime. So when you're getting to that sort of 4 o'clock and it's pitch black, you're thinking, well, actually it's not time for tea, it's not, you've still got time to shoot, there's still things you can do. And whilst we're in this awful lockdown, the camera can be in the garden, shooting the night sky, using live, so that it's got so many variables. And I don't really think people understand how much you can do with it. And so hopefully we can try and enlighten a few people.
All right, well, shall we make a start?
Yes, let's make a start.
Excellent.
Let's make a start. So I'm going to share my screen, and here we go. As Angela and I have just been talking, live composite is a USP, a unique feature of Olympus cameras, and it's only made possible by mirrorless technology. You cannot do this if you have a mirror in your camera. And this is because of things like live view technology. Live view means instead of looking through an optical viewfinder, you look through a viewfinder and you actually see what's happening. You can use your histograms. What you see is what you get. So you're much more able to control things like exposure and view. And although a lot of people take a bit of time to get used to that digital viewfinder, let me tell you, there are so many benefits to it. And the benefits certainly outweigh anything else. And so I've shot all systems, and it literally, when I first sort of used a digital viewfinder, I sort of looked through and thought, well, that's a bit weird, especially with my sort of 36 years experience. But you get used to it really quickly, and you get used to it really easily, and it's brilliant. So let's look at live comp now. So on your cameras, whether you're an Olympus shooter or not, doesn't matter, you will have a feature on there called bulb. And bulb is basically, it's an option to do long exposures. The shutter is open the whole time. Your finger's on the shutter. You literally leave it open. Generally, you'd have like a remote release, so you don't have to stand there for sort of 60 seconds looking like a bit of a wally. And also, you don't want to be touching the camera whilst the camera's shutter is open for that long, because any movement or vibration can interfere with the image. And you basically keep your finger on the release. The shutter is open. The whole time the shutter is open, the image sensor is capturing light. It's brilliant. It's a great feature. And if you use things like ND filters, and you put them in front of your lens, basically that stops down the light, allowing you to do beautiful long exposures, like slowing the water down and without actually overexposing. Now, the problem with bulb, of course, is if you're not using filters, they do have, the highlights especially have tendencies to overexpose. The other problem with bulb is there's a lot of guesswork. Thankfully digital is now here, because when we shot with film cameras and bulb, you would waste quite a few frames before you actually, in fact, you wouldn't even know until you got your film developed whether or not you got it right. Thankfully, with digital, at least we can look back at the previous test image and see. So bulb has got a lot easier, but there's still a fair bit of guesswork, because the whole time you're using bulb, you have blackout. You're not seeing anything. You're basically, looking up, just waiting for that 30-second exposure or that 60-second exposure, whatever, to finish, and then you can preview. So it has got a bit easier, but there are still some issues with bulb. It does take that little bit longer. So we do have bulb on the cameras, but we also have Olympus's version, which is what we call live time. Now, live time works exactly the same way as bulb, as in you press the shutter. In live time, you don't have to hold it. You press the shutter, it's open, or you'd use a remote, the same. But the difference with live time is you see your image developing like you do on the back of the screen or through the viewfinder, however you're doing it. And the joy about live time, and we'll go on to live composite in a minute, is it has that incredible, if you ever did black and white printing, that's what I'm trained as. If you ever did black and white printing and you ever did your first print in a dev tray and you saw the image appear on paper, live time is a bit like that. You start seeing your image develop on the back of the screen, and you've got the histogram that shows you if you're overexposing, and so on and so on. So it's that one step, that one jump up from bulb. And so again, it's really helpful if you want to use filters, because if you wanted to do a 2 or 3 minute exposure, say you wanted to photograph Brighton Pier, and you wanted to make it a real high key image and you want the water to be completely still and milky, you can shoot with lifetime and a filter for 2 or 3 minutes. And when you feel you've got the desired effect, you press the shutter or a remote or app, or however you're going to stop the shutter, and that's great. So lifetime and bulb, you know, lifetime is the sort of grown-up version of bulb, and again, as I said, it's only available on Olympus cameras and mirrorless. So let's get into live comp. Now, a lot of people get quite confused by live comp. They're like, what is it? What is it? Well, we call it live comp, but as Ange and I both said, it's live composite. And if you do and understand what composite is, it means layering of images. It's putting one image on top of the other. Now, normally with bulb, you would take a number of images. Maybe if you were doing light painting, you'd light one area, then you take another image and you'd light another area, so on and so on and so on. And you see this all over YouTube and so on, and they're very, very effective. Let's not take that away from it. But what it means you've then got to do is you've got to take those images, you've then got to process them yourself in Photoshop or whichever software you're using, and you've got to create that composite image yourself via layers. Live comp does it for you. You're saying, what? I know, right? Live comp is it's an ingenious bit of technology, and live comp basically takes 2 images. Let's say takes 2 images. It actually takes more, but let's talk about 2 images. The first image, and this is how I set live comp up. It's different depending on what you're doing. But for instance, live comp takes the first image as your base exposure. So get in the heads of, we're in a beautiful field. There's a church in front of us that's got some beautiful low light, some ambient lights. We want to photograph the stars. But what we don't want is we don't want to leave the camera running for 3 or 4 hours, because what will happen is the church lights will start to blow out. With live comp, what you do is you expose for those church lights, all right? And that could be 2-second exposure, for instance. And you check that, 2-second exposure. Then you press the shutter a second time, and it shows you on the back of the camera, 1 shot, 2 shots, ready to go. And on that second exposure, the camera will keep shooting, but it's layering those shots over that base exposure. And however much light or sometimes movement, depending on what you're shooting, is added to the image, instead of it blowing out those highlights, all it does is just keeps recording the new light or the new movement. So you've got to put that in context, okay? And obviously I've got lots of images to show you how that process is done. It's quite interesting with live composite because people think it's quite complicated. It really, really isn't. It's just taking that stage. It's like taking bulb, taking live comp to the taking lifetime to the next level. And the joy about live comp is you can see exactly what's happening on the back of the screen. You can stop it and start it when you've had enough. And you can completely control the exposure literally on the first shot. You know, if you take that base shot and you think, oh no, the church is too bright, then you would start again and you drop your exposure to say 1 second, 2 seconds, 30 seconds, it's up to you. So you've got to remember that all the second shot does is record any extra light, any movement onto that base layer. Let's have a look at a little video. Now, I'm going to play this video twice because I want to watch. This is live time, right? The first thing we spoke about. Now, firstly, I want you to watch the histogram at the bottom. So there's no filter in front of this camera. That histogram is shifting pretty quickly right the way across to the right-hand side. And you can see by the buildings and light in the background, that's overblowing. Right, I'm going to come back to that in a sec. Live composite, they've taken the base shot. This is the second shot. And you can see that the histogram is staying on the left-hand side. You're keeping an eye on it. The buildings in the background aren't getting blown out. They're staying beautiful and exposed as you want. But the only recorded light is the traffic trails, right? Now I'm going to play that again. And the reason I'm going to play it again is because there's a lot to see in one video. So again, I want you to look at the blowouts and the histogram in the first session, which is live comp. Or bulb, you know, this is what bulb is doing although you can't see it in bulb. And then I want you to have another look at live composite, and I want you to watch the traffic trails. I want you to watch the histogram. So, as I said, on the first one, which is lifetime, watch the histogram and watch everything blow out really, really quickly. This is a 1 second exposure, just quickly turning over, 9 seconds, 10 seconds, blown out, done. Traffic trails are now completely a mess. So, you know, you'd need a filter for that. Live composite. Okay, now have a look. Keep your eyes on the traffic trails. Keep your eyes on the histogram, and keep your eyes on the buildings that are not getting blown out. So that's been speeded up. That's like 17, 18 seconds, much longer than the previous. But you can see that's the base exposure, which was for the buildings and everything that's not moving, like the roads and the billboards and things like that in that base image are staying the same. So I'm going to show you a couple of images. This is one of my favorites. This is taken in Hamburg, and this is the train tracks. This is a gorgeous image. And again, when you think about the trains coming through, this isn't just one train. This is quite a few trains. The guy stood there and actually shot this. Lots and lots of trains. This is one of our ambassadors' images. But it's not the traffic trails I want you to look at. It's the bits that haven't blown out. It's the station number where it says P14 on that top left-hand corner there. It's the, shouldn't brand it, but it's the Park House and the Bosch sign. They're not bleeding. They haven't overexposed. It's the buildings in the background and the sky. They've all kept that image, and that's that exposure. And that's because the first shot, he has exposed for those items because he knows that he doesn't need to expose for the light that's coming in, because the light from the trains is going to be recorded on top of that base image. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but you know, I want to make sure that everybody understands how simple and how easy it is. This is one of mine. I miss London. I love my winter walks. I would be doing that right now. This is what I'd normally be doing, taking out a group of 6 or 7. And this is the classic shot, isn't it? It's the old black phone box. I think there aren't many left in the UK now. It's one of the only ones in London. I have exposed for St. Paul's. Now, this night is very incredible because this night was the foggiest night, and everything, the fog was so low, and it gave this beautiful, ethereal, weird sort of spooky night. It's like a Halloween night. And all I've done is I've taken my first shot. So I'm literally waiting. My first shot's taken. I've exposed for St. Paul's, and all I'm doing is I'm waiting for the bus to come past. As soon as that and I'm looking to the right, as soon as I see the bus coming, I press my shutter or my app, depending on what I'm using. And then I stop it again, literally a couple of seconds after, and it's recorded that light. Okay. So that's quite a quick and easy shot. That's not one where I've sat on a bridge and just kept the image building and building and building. This is something that's done and over with in a few seconds. Now, this is the other side of St. Paul's. It's the side that doesn't get photographed half as much. But again, this shot is a 1 second shot. I've exposed the first shot. I've exposed for the road and for everything else and for the street. And all I've done is wait for that bus to come, press the shutter, and I love the fact that that's long and elongated. I didn't want it to just be red lights. I wanted you to know that it was a bus. I wanted, if you leave the shutter open for too long, all you get is lights. Well, I wanted it to capture the bus and to show those incredible lines and to show how London buses look. So we've gone over traffic trails, and traffic trails are really interesting. There's a bridge near you. There's a road near you. You know, at the moment we're in lockdown, so just be careful. But there is lots to photograph, even if you only can just pop out to the end of your road. The second really interesting thing, now this is something you can all do, right? Is star trails, because wherever you are in the world, there are stars, all right, assuming we have a nice clear sky. But you don't have to be too far away from your home to be able to take pictures of the sky. And even if you only have a zoom lens or whatever, this type of photography is so beautiful. It's so easy, and should be done by all. So this isn't a 1 second switch on, switch off type shot. Okay, this is press the camera shutter once to expose for the mountains and the tree. Great. Press this shutter the second time to start recording the planet as it's moving, because obviously we're turning, and that's going to mean that the stars give you these beautiful trails. But what's interesting is then you can go in for a cup of tea, because I leave these for 2 or 3 hours. I mean, you know, because obviously the Earth is turning actually, well, it's quick, but in relation to us, very short, very small. So this is one you can just go in, have a cup of tea. You haven't got to worry about it. Go in and sort of set the timer for a couple of hours. The joy is Olympus cameras can have the shutter open for 3 hours on older models, 6 hours on later models. And if you know where Polaris is, which is the North Star, and there are apps out there that can tell you where the North Star is, you get these incredible images. This one is amazing, because obviously you've got the landscape, and the joy is, even though this is a 1.5 hour exposure, so you've only got thin sort of star trails, little small ones, the base and the tree hasn't overexposed, because that's what you shot for in the beginning. This is one of mine. Excuse the fence falling down in the backyard, and also the security light. This is a really, really windy night, I don't live here anymore, which is a shame. I moved out in August. It was one of the most windiest nights, but it was really interesting, because I thought I haven't done any star trails, and the security light kept coming on. It was all very annoying. But what I didn't realize, I'd been living in this house for about 3 or 4 months, is that Polaris was right behind my house. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I got the 8mm on the camera. I always, when you're in a private area, in a secure area, I always put the camera and set it all up during the day, because obviously you wouldn't want to do that in public, you know. But when you've got a private garden and it's all secure, you can do your composition, you can do all your setup during the day. And then when you're, you know, maybe a couple of glasses of wine in, the last thing you want to do is stumble out there in the night and trip over. And all you've got to do is then turn the camera on and press the shutter. Very, very simple. You can also see, and I haven't photoshopped this at all, I wanted to leave it in its entirety. I would probably darken the skies a bit more. I would probably Photoshop a bit at the bottom, you know, and maybe if you were really, really into star photography and astro, you'd probably take the plane out that's going across the sky. But this is a shot straight out of camera. There's not been anything done to this. And I wanted to show you in the state that it comes out of. As it was a really windy night. And so again, you can see how simple and easy, and actually this image could be probably improved a bit with a bit of Photoshop or a bit of software. So we've spoken about star trails, we've spoken about traffic trails. Now we're going to talk about fireworks. Not lots of those going out on the moment. But again, think about how live comp works. Think about base exposures. So this image, what have we exposed for? We've exposed for the buildings. We've exposed for the light that's there, the ambient light that's already there in the image. And the only thing that has recorded is the trails at the front of the trains coming through, the boats coming out of the boatyard, and the fireworks that have gone off. Now, obviously with fireworks, you never know when they're going to go off. And I'm going to show you another instance in a minute. But the joy about it is you can take that base shot, that first base shot, and you can just wait. You know, you can wait. And then as soon as you hear the you can press the shutter. As soon as you know a firework is going off, you can press the shutter for the second time, and then it starts recording. The joy of that is then you can leave the camera, because if you're on a firework display where you've got quite a big view, obviously other fireworks will be going off. So they will also capture those. You've got to be careful you don't overdo it. I've seen some images where there's about 25 fireworks in one image. That doesn't work. And so in that sort of respect, you need to be careful. But when you do things like, you know, most sort of displays, they don't all go off from the same spot. They tend to go off along a line, and you can get some really, really, really awesome images. Now, this is something that is one of those phenomenon where you either love lightning or you don't. Once you can sort of harness its power in an image, it's the most incredible thing. And I really enjoy lightning strikes. Again, with lightning strikes, you never know when it's going to happen. So you would press the shutter, you expose for the base image here. You can see that we've still got some lamp light. There's still some street light and the grass is still nice. And we've done a 10-second exposure. So there's a little bit of light, obviously all on a tripod. And then you press the shutter for the second time and you walk away. Because at some point that lightning will happen and you don't know when that's going to happen. Because the shutter is already open, it will capture it. It is the most incredible thing. And there's no, oh, quick go. You're already shooting, and it will just happen as naturally as you want. So we've gone over the lightning. That's quite a good one. What else is live comp good for? Live comp is great for landscapes. Now, we were speaking earlier about the moody night that I took some of our Olympus guys out for a little London walk. And if you look, and I don't know if you know London at all, but basically the cheese grater and the buildings there, you can't see the top of them. They're actually missing in the fog. And so it was a beautiful night. But what I want you to look at is I want you to look at the light on the water, and I want you to look at the water, because this is done without a filter. So although the water's not smoothed over like you would if you were using an ND filter and a 3-minute exposure, it's not milky, but it's not, if you've ever been to the Thames is quite ripply. And what it's done is not only is it smoothed the water out, but because as it smooths the water out, and as the water moves whilst the exposure is running, of course you get longer light from the buildings down into the sea or into the water. So what's normally just a little sprinkle of light then sort of drags its way into the water. And London has so many lights on the bridges and things you don't generally notice in that respect. You can see them, but it's only when you're watching a live composite image start to bloom that you start seeing these lights and these forms of light stretching out into the water. And that's what I want you to look at. I want you to look at the water, and I want you to look at how those, especially on the sort of left there where you've got that the sort of ambery orange and the sort of peach light, it's starting to stretch out into the water. And this is what it does. It's because you've got the shutter open for that amount of time and the water is moving, every shift that the water's reflecting the light and giving it that shift, it's recording. So it's really beautiful for landscapes as well. All right, effectively, this is a seascape, but it's a landscape. And this is the sort of the other thing that people don't realize that you can get with a live composite. You can do it with lifetime, but you've got to need a filter. The joy about live comp at night is when you're shooting with a filter at night, you sort of can't see what you're doing. It's pretty black. But with live composite, you don't have that. You don't have that, you don't have that blackout through bulb, but you also don't have the blackout of the filter on the front. So it's a completely different way of shooting, and it's brilliant. It's quite liberating, let me tell you. Now, spot the mistake. Spot the mistake. One of the mistakes was there was a carrier bag, which I asked somebody to move. But if you look at the boat on the left, you can see that shifted, right? And there was a reason I wanted to put that in there because, these things have to be noted. If you're on the water and you're shooting long exposures and you have things moving, great if it's a boat moving past and you're capturing the light of the boat coming through. We were waiting for the bridge to lift, and we're waiting for a boat to come through. We're also on the top of the bridge. You'll get buses and cars go by, so you can get some beautiful lights. But you still got to be aware that it will capture movement. And I wanted to show this because actually the black and white is lovely. You got the beautiful light again dropping right the way from the tower all the way through the image to the bottom. But of course, ruined by the moving boat, because actually the boat is moored, so it's not moving. It's sort of bobbing up and down on the water. And that's where you can see that static is what it's all about, unless you are capturing the movement of something. That boat is moored, so it's static, but it's moving. So I wanted to show this one, because I just love Tower Bridge. And, you know, I also wanted to show that things work really well in black and white in live composite as well. So live composite light painting. Now, light painting, wow, what a genre. I've been doing this for 36 years, and light painting is probably one of the latest genres of photography where it's an actual genre, it's an actual profession. People get paid to do light painting. I mean, who knew, right? And again, it's made a whole lot easier by using live composite. You can absolutely do, the joy about live composite is, and live light painting is, this gives you this really good opportunity to practice and muck about with it before you head out, before you do sort of any serious stuff. And light painting, there are so many groups. I mean, we've got lovely Michelle Essendon. She runs RPS groups on light painting. They're fantastic. And it's one of those things with light painting is you can be as serious or as fun as you want it to be. You get the kids involved. You can, you know, if you're really creative and you're really arty, which I'm not when it comes to drawing, you can obviously make some amazing things. There's some incredible people to follow. But, you know, for the sake of £2, you can get sort of 10 lights. I've used the red, the blue and the white there. To create some amazing images. So literally this afternoon, I threw some bits together. That's notice that is a 3/4 bottle empty of gin because I've drunk some of it. So what I've done, and here it is here's the gin. So it's proof that I took this earlier. I basically put this bottle of gin on a tile. I've turned all the lights out, so it's pretty pitch black. I've got a standard torch, you know, sort of $5.99 torch. And I've basically pressed the shutter. I'm using f8 ISO 200 with a 1 second live comp exposure. And so in the dining room, it's pitch black, but all I'm doing is I'm using the torch. So I press the shutter for the second time to get the shutter opening. I'm using the torch to light the bottle, right? So that's what I'm doing. And as I'm lighting the bottle, you can see it happening on the screen. But what I also wanted was I wanted the shadow in the background. So I sort of did a bit of practice before the camera came on, and I used the torch in one direction so I could get that shadow in the background, kept the shutter running, turned off the torch, make sure you wear black and don't have your arms out because obviously you can get that sort of motion in the air. Then kept the shutter running, put the torch away, and then got that little sort of 60p or one, whatever they are. As I said, they're a couple of quid for a bag. Got the red light, turned it on, and just whizzed it around the top. And this is how simple it's only recording the light that you're adding in. All right, so you can create some amazing light painting, and this is how and where your light painting journey should start. Even where your live composite journey should start, really, because you can do this at home with no money. All you need, I've used a bottle because it's great. It can reflect the light backwards. But all you need is a torch. You can even do it with your phone. So it's really a really good sort of starting place for light painting. So light painting, let's talk a little bit more about that. Let me tell you, I was saying a minute ago about genres and it being a whole professional thing. You can spend a lot of money on super duper tools and bits and pieces, wands, orb makers, and you know, these things are pretty incredible. But the joy about this type of photography is all you got to do is get a strip of LED lights from your local DIY store, get a bicycle wheel, get a piece of wood and stick the lights to it, and you've created your own light painting materials. This doesn't have to be an expensive hobby. This is not just about the photo creation or the image creation. It's about making those tools to have fun with. And there are so many fun things you can do for literally no money. You know, winter's here. We can't go out. what a better, you know, there's no better joy than actually playing with this sort of stuff and actually having a go at creativity. You can draw, you can create images, you can do so much with light painting, and I think it's fun. So you can see in this image, this is what I wanted to show you, how dark the image is when I'm first starting to shoot. Okay, so I wanted the image black, so I've actually underexposed. I don't want to see the bottle because I'm going to light the bottle at the end. And all I've done is run a green tube of one of those sort of sticks along the back, and I'm keeping the shutter open at all times. I'm on the second shot. I'm not touching the camera. The camera is there. It's on its tripod. It's doing its thing. I'm just painting with lights. All I'm doing is just getting the light, turning that one off, going back, getting another light, turning that one on. And then once I've added all the light at the back, camera still not touched the camera, then I get my torch and I light the front of the gin bottle. And as I said, you know, this took 29 seconds, 30 seconds, you know, and the only thing that's wrong is that I'm not that artistic. I see some incredible things made with light painting, Christmas trees and all sorts of beautiful things. You know, I only wish I was more creative, let me tell you. But this is the sort of stuff that you can do at home, really simply, really cheap and really good fun. So let's go on to a little bit more serious light painting, right? This is a combination of traffic trails and light painting, right? I mean, this is double thinking now. We're starting to get into the realms of, you know, they're at the gates. They've exposed for the gates. They've exposed for the buildings. You can see that is not blowing out. And all we're doing is on that second shutter, we're waiting for cars to come and moving a light painting stick as well. So you've also got the double choice of doing a bit of both. Now, this is perfect in places like Oxford Street where you can stand in the middle and you've got cars going both sides. I've done quite a bit of that, especially during Christmas decoration time, although at the moment, obviously, we're not allowed out. But again, something that I will be doing next year once the events are up and running. This is something you've got to do because you stand in that middle strip in Oxford Street, you know, while the cars are whizzing past, but it's really good fun. So where do you find live comp? Live composite, and we're going to go on to that once we put the cameras back on and we've got some questions, but live composite is on every single Olympus camera. It's on even on the tough models, in the little waterproof sort of underwater type models. It's on the pen range. It's on all the EM5s, EM1s, but it has, as Angela and I said earlier, it has changed where it is. It used to be on the buried in manual, so you have to go to change the mode data manual. You go all the way through to 60-second exposure and beyond. There you will find bulb, lifetime and live comp. Now we have changed the cameras quite a bit in the last 2 years, 3 years. And now now we have a B button on the top, which is a long exposure button, and you can find live comp in there. I'm really sorry, my dog just jumped up, down you get. And there you can find it there. So it's really simple, really easy. There you go. So we'll talk about hints and tips in a minute. There are some things you 100% must do. You've got to use a tripod. You know, like with any long exposure, you need the things that are static, and the things that base exposure are exposing for, you need them to be static. You don't want them to be moving. Always try and use a cable release. There have been times I've forgotten mine, let me tell you. You know, if you haven't got a cable release with Olympus cameras, you can use the OI Share app, which allows you to shoot from the phone so you don't touch the camera at all. You will always be using manual exposure because you want as much control, and, you know, obviously getting your aperture right and stuff. If you're shooting landscapes, you'll need a good depth of field. Manual focus is always a good one now, especially at night, but you've got focus indicators and manual focus assist to help you along. But again, as I was saying, if your eyesight is a bit rubbish like mine is, if you're doing star trails from the garden, set it up during the day. Set your focus to infinity, get your composition, do everything during the day. It makes it so much easier. Watch your battery levels, right? That's so important because you know, if you've got a shutter open for 3 hours, that's quite hungry. So keep that in mind. And as I said, look out for the apps that show you Polaris. There is some really good apps like Skyview, that's free. The sort of non-premium version that tells you where Polaris is. And check out Image Space TV for YouTube because there's loads of tutorials by Gavin and Lewis and all sorts. So lots of things you can find on screen as well. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. Ange,
Hey, you're back.
I'm back. How was it? How are we doing? How much have I talked for?
Very good. I should say to people, if you've not tried painting with light, be very, very careful because it's extremely addictive. Once you start doing it, it's great fun and it's perfect this time of year.
Oh, it's so true. I live opposite an old abbey, a ruined abbey, and I took out my sisters. They sort of all live in the same house, and he's a Nikon shooter. And I said, "Come on, we're gonna go do some some light painting." And he's, I don't know what that is. And we took him out. It was pitch black. And he borrowed an Olympus camera because he wanted to see what live comp was at. And oh my God, he keeps like, when are we going back out? When are we going back out? And it was great because I was showing him how to light the trees, you know, because it's not just about the bit, it's about the whole thing. And we were lighting trees purple, lighting trees green. And we were like, I think we ended up coming in at 10:30. I hadn't eaten, but you just want to keep going. It's so much fun. It's so much fun.
You always thought, oh, if I just put a bit more light there, or change that color, I'll do this and I'll do that. It's great fun. And you can use all sorts of lights, and you can even use flash guns. You put gel over them and fire them up into the trees or whatever.
100%. And, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, these expensive light painting tools are fantastic because they're ready made, you know, you can go but honestly, people making their own, ingenious. I mean, I saw one the other day where this lady had got a wheel, she put some LED lights on and it was just amazing. And I was like, wow. And during lockdown, what, you know, how healthy is to recycle some bits and pieces and, you know, to actually make the tools that you're going to use for photography, because they can be a bit expensive sometimes, can't they?
I mean, those finger lights that you showed, you could put those on a bamboo pole and then you've got, like, you know, you'd have different colors, and if you wave them around you get stripes and all sorts. It'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I've had these years. I mean, I bought these when I first started, and they've got little elastic bands on them, so you can literally put them on your fingers and just sort of dance around with them. You know, I've done that so many times. And you know, they're not the best. Exactly. Well, it's this gin. When I sort of drunk half the gin, that's what I'm doing. So yeah, so you know, it doesn't have to be expensive. It can be a couple of quid just to have a bit of fun. You know, and I think the light painting journey is probably where live composite should start, especially in these weird and wonderful times. You know, you can even use your iPhone or your Android, you know, whatever phone you're using. But yeah, as I said, for like, I think we got 50, so I think we split them between the ISS team, and I think they were like $6.99. So nobody needs 50, but you can just get like a little pack of fun things, you know.
Great. Okay. Should we go over to some questions?
Yay! Good stuff.
Right, let's start at the top. Denise has asked, can you change settings between the first shutter and the second shutter?
No, I mean, you can't change. No is the answer, because once that shutter is the base shot is done, you're ready to go on. I mean, how I do it is I tend, when I'm out and about, if I think, okay, what is my exposure for that building going to be? I will take like a 1 second or a 2 second shot, not in live comp, but just normally, to see if I'm over or under exposing. And so that means I can pretty much go straight into live comp and know where that base exposure is going to be. But the answer is no.
But you can time when you start that second
exposure
or series of second exposures. And it doesn't really matter beyond that, because actually you're effectively continually exposing.
Yes, exactly that. Yes, it's to keep going. Yes.
but you're not burning out the highlights.
So brilliant.
Okay, so someone said, how do you know what the base shot is? Sorry, what the base shot is correctly exposed? Do you see it on the screen as live view before you go to the composite shot?
Yeah, so, and this is what I was saying about, you know, earlier when I was shooting in this room, it was pitch black. So that's not really it's a good way to play with live composite, but it's not good at getting your base exposure. So what I would do is, if I was wanting to go out and shoot something outside, especially as you saw in that little video, I would, in standard manual exposure, maybe take a 1 second or a 2 second exposure, zoom in, check that exposure is pretty good on those static items, on those static buildings, and then dial that into your live composite settings. And then you can choose 1 second, 2 second, whatever you want. That's how I do mine, because it's quick, it's easy, and it saves no wasted time. There's no wasted time. It's literally one shot.
Great. Okay. Wendy says, can you use the inbuilt ND filters that the EM1 Mark III has in live composite mode?
No, not yet. I mean, that's interesting. Somebody asked me that the other day, if you could start sort of crossing some of these power hungry or processor hungry sort of features. Not yet, but that is something that I have fed back to Japan. I think they're like, what, have you not got enough? But it is something that I was asked about a month or so ago, and I did feed it back. But at the moment, the answer is no.
Yeah, you could of course use an ND filter, a traditional ND filter.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's the joy of it. I mean, ND can still be used on lifetime, live comp, or bulb. Yeah, and ND filters, like, you know, Angie, obviously the glass ones are the better ones. You know, there are some really good brands out there. So yeah, and even when I'm doing sort of 2 or 3 minute exposures, as I said, but sort of Brighton Pier and stuff, I went really high key, nice contrasty stuff. I still use my Lee filters and live time rather than live comp.
Yeah. Okay. Diana said, I think she's asking about your gin bottle with the red light. She said, did you put the red light behind the bottle?
So what I did was, she says, hang on a minute, let me get some fever tree out with this. So what I did was, I had the bottle on the black tile. I used this torch like this, and I just basically lit as much as I wanted, because I can see the image appearing. I didn't use it on flashing, I used it on solid, like that one. So I just lit the bottle like this, as you do, and you can see that appearing. Then obviously torches put away. You do have to be quite careful. I had gloves on. I made sure I had gloves on, because you can start seeing your pinky hands and stuff. And then I got the little red switch like so, and I just spun it around the bottle like that.
Yeah,
takes a bit of practice. I mean, I just literally did that one like that. But you can get some stunning. And if you were going to do the red light first and then the torch after, what it does is it affects that light on the front of the bottle. So I tend to, depending on where I'm putting the light, if I'm putting the coloured lights behind the bottle, I'll add the torch afterwards. If I'm putting the colour lights in front of the bottle, I'll add the light before. And like you said earlier, that could be a flash, that could be with a gel on it. I just happen to have this $3.99 torch that I sort of randomly. The other thing I do is I tend to cover the torch like this. So what I'll do is I'll sort of aim my hand, because if you start doing this, the camera will pick up the light. So you want to aim it at the bottle and then do that. And always cover your hand over rather than taking the torch away. As soon as you take the torch away like that, you'll have a streak of light in your image. So it's always about covering, moving away, uncovering.
Yeah.
You know, just as a little hint and tip, because I've done that so many times. I sort of, well, there's a big squiggle. I've ruined that image. So when you're leaving and when you're entering the image is the time when you need everything covered.
Yeah.
That can really annoy you.
Yeah, very good point. I noticed with that image that you had a really nice shadow actually of the bottle. So it's in that case, it was, you know, it worked really well. It was quite a sharp shadow, but that's something to bear in mind, that when you're putting light onto something, you're also casting shadows. So you need to think about those.
Yeah, and the other thing is if you're in one direction, not the band, because that's
I was
just
going to
weird.
say, if you're Harry Styles,
If you're in one direction, if you're pointing the torch in one direction, you will see the shadow appear. But of course, as soon as you start moving the torch, the shadow moves and then it distorts the shadow. So you've got to sort of stay like this and make sure, it's a quite sort of, it's not careful, but you've got to be watching the shadow as where you're putting the light as well. Because as it otherwise then it becomes a really weird shape, the shadow. And I wanted the shadow to look like the shadow of the bottle.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Well, Lillian has asked, how do you see the image build up? She says it would be helpful to see a live demo with a camera. Now, we did talk about this.
Oh, we did talk about this, didn't we? We were like, I phoned Angela earlier. I said, I was thinking I might do a live demo. She went, really? We were going to do a live demo, but because of internet connection and stuff like that, we were just a bit worried. But if you see on that video, and I'm quite happy to play it again, that's the image building up. That's what you see on the back of the camera. You will see the traffic trails start to build, and that's exactly how it works. It's
a little bit like pushing the exposure slider up on a dark image, isn't it? Gradually stuff starts to appear.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, when as I said, it was almost like the first time I did a darkroom print, when I saw that image appearing in a dev trail, I was like, oh, wow, I still get that with Lifetime. I still get that because I think with live comps, like that's like sorcery. It's like, how is that possible? But it is because mirrorless cameras and technology, that's how it works. So you just got to have a try and you will see for yourself. But there are lots and lots of videos of the back of the camera type stuff out there that you can go find and have a look.
Yeah. Okie dokie. Marilyn says, is it advisable to have an additional battery pack attached to the camera if you're doing light trails? She has an EM5 Mark III. Very nice.
So an EM5 Mark III can, so the battery pack can charge the camera, but it can't power the camera as you're shooting. The only one that can do that is the EM1X. So you've got to be careful that although it's, for the EM1X, you need a thing called power delivery packs, which because it's got two processors and because it's quite a hungry beast, you can literally have the pack dangling and shooting, but it won't charge and power at the same time. It's one or the other. The EM5 Mark III will only charge the batteries. It doesn't power the camera. So just be careful that, you just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But when you're shooting star trails, what's really interesting is, once you've stopped, you sort of can't then add on. But what you can do theoretically is you could start again and then composite those two images together. But, it's sort of, 3 hours is quite a long time. Just make sure your batteries are full up. And they can go to -10. So even if it's cold, it's not a problem. But the bigger batteries on things like EM1s and so on do have that power to enable it to go for quite a long time. The other thing I would say is, of course, is if you are going to be shooting those star trails and things like that, great that you can see it on the screen, of course. But if you're trying to conserve battery power, just look at it through the viewfinder, shut the screen before you start and look at it through the viewfinder. You can still see it. You can still see it achieved, but you will save a little bit of battery power. That always helps.
Lo says she really needs this for the kind of shots that she does. She already shoots Nikon and Fujifilm, so she's hesitant to get a third make.
Of course.
But could you recommend an Olympus model that would be equivalent to a Fuji X-T3, for example?
Yeah, it's difficult that. I mean, listen, any Olympus camera will do it. All right. So you don't have to go out and think, oh my gosh, I've got to have a third system. You could easily go and get a used EM5 Mark I, which is a fairly sort of early model, but it still has that same feature and function. Live composite is still in those models. And I think there's like EM1s now. If you don't want to invest in a lot of money, EM1s you can pick up for like 280 quid secondhand. I would just make sure you get a fairly wide angle lens if you're looking to do the sky. Something like a 1240 or something like that. So that would be my recommendation. So, as I said, there's, as much as obviously part of my job to do selling. I'm also a great believer that, you know, there's a recycle and reuse. So, you know, that if you're wanting to try and thinking, oh, you know, think about that option. But if you wanted something that was equivalent to the X1, the 100, I would say is probably an EM1 Mark II or an EM1 Mark III.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. Okay. Tina says, can you do a zoom effect on the second image? You zoom in and out or out?
Well, the answer is you can, but you've got to think about how much. So if you were, for instance, shooting an 8-second exposure, then obviously if you moved it between the first shot shooting and the not I don't mean the base shot, I mean each exposure thereon, then you would have different effects depending on how long you've set that exposure for. So when you saw that video running, if you looked in the right hand side, you saw a clock go 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's basically on a 1-second exposure, 24, 25, 26. That's taken all those shots and put them on top. So it's probably not as effective as you think it could be. And I would say, again, that's a little bit of trial and error depending on how long your exposure is for. Yeah, because if you did it on 8 seconds, you know, you wouldn't notice anything. All you'd have is a zoomed in image and then a zoomed out image. And then, of course, the problem with that is if you have buildings or trees in there, they're going to be in a different area. So, you know, it's not going to give you that that sort of camera movement that you may think you're going to get. Yeah. So just think about the other things that are in the shot. If you were just pointing to the sky, again, what you're going to do if you zoom in is you're only going to make everything out of alignment. So I think it's quite a tricky one to actually say that that's going to work.
Would live time might be better for that?
Yeah, rather than live comp. Yeah, because, you know, and I know that if you've got that in the image and then you zoom out and in and it's like that, it's not going to be the same. It's going to be a bit.
Yeah.
But who knows? I mean, let's get some art going. The one thing about the SheClicks group, right, is art. You know, I've seen more art images on this group than any other group I belong to or have ever seen. And the one thing that us ladies do well is the creative side. You know, we're all about that small detail, about that finer detail. And I'll tell you what, if anybody's going to do it, I'm actually going to set you a challenge. I want to see movement in live composite. Let's start a thing, Ange. Let's start a thing.
Okay, we'll do that then. Okay, we've got a hello from the States.
Yay.
And they're asking, what would happen if you were photographing something that would be changing colours? So I guess, I mean, that could be fireworks. It could be, you know, what do you call them, fairground rides.
Well, I mean, for instance, when you, so say like a traffic light, if a traffic light is on red and you're in live composite and then it goes to amber and then it goes to green, the traffic light, the image basically has 3 colors in it. It has the red, the green and the thing. If you were looking at one thing that then changed colors, for instance, have I got something that changed colors? No, not on me. You would more likely get a blend of color. If you were moving it around as it changed color, then you would get the individual colors and you probably get a nice sort of spectrum. But if this changed color and it just was static, you would get a blend of the color. And I would imagine that the strongest colors would come out. That it would probably be bluesy, greensy, redsy, wouldn't it? You know what I mean? Depending on what sort of spectrum it covered. But I think that would depend on whether it's moving or whether it's static. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that would make the difference. I guess theoretically, if you had a red, green and a blue light and they were all the same power and it didn't move, you'd end up with a white light, wouldn't you?
Oh my god!
You'd never get a light that well balanced.
No,
not at,
I mean,
what, £10 for 50?
Yeah, no, but how incredible. Yes, it's true, isn't it? Yeah, you would. That's your scientific mind working out.
Okay. Joe's ears are obviously pricked up when we mentioned inbuilt ND filters. She's asking, which cameras are they? Where are they?
Yep. They're on the I'm saying it like I'm an idiot, EM1 Mark III and on the EM1X. Now, they're great because they will give you up to 60 seconds of ND and you can use them handheld. Just done a video for that. In fact, if you have a look on our Olympus thingy. There's a 2-minute video about, so Clare Voyle is using a tripod version, so she's shooting 4 seconds with ND. I'm going handheld with the EM5 and a little tiny 9-18 handheld for 2 seconds using live ND. And the joy about live ND is it's one of those things, if you get caught out and you're sort of down, you've got your camera and you haven't bought your tripod and you're not out on a serious day, you're just out with family or just out for a nice stroll, and then you see something, oh, I wish I had my ND filters. This is how this little sort of the little sort of feature comes up, because you know it's I've used it more when I haven't had my serious kit with me. And I'm like, oh, I have. Use your ND handheld, fantastic. So we did some stuff at Herne Bay and it was lovely. Got beautiful, smooth, milky water, and it's all there. And once you go over 60 seconds, you then would go back to your filters, you know, so, but I'm sure that technology's, it's the early technology and it's only going to get better. So I'd imagine that will get longer, but the fact you can hand hold it, brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And whereabouts in the menu would you find the ND filter?
So that is menu, and once you've got the menu open, you've got the camera at the top, and then camera menu 2, it's in there and it's right at the very bottom. Okay. You can only use full manual or shutter priority on that feature. You can't use aperture priority. So if you're an aperture priority person, you've got to get out of that and try another feature.
That makes sense. Okay, so Kathy has asked, what is the best way to know what length of what length each shot should be? Are fewer longer individual exposures better than more short ones, or just different?
Yeah, that's interesting, because when you're shooting star trails, because of the all right, you know, we know that the Earth's moving fairly fast, but because actually things are moving quite slowly, you don't want a shot every second, because you are actually never going to record that amount of information. It's too much. So what I do on star trails is I tend to have a much longer exposure time, you know. So it is about sort of, you know, if your camera is going to be out for 3 hours or 6 hours in the garden, then you would probably have slightly longer exposure times. If, for instance, like for light painting, when it's a fairly quick job, you can have it on a second, done. If you were shooting fireworks, I would say it could be 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. So it does vary depending on what you're shooting. But what you've got to think about is how quick those things are coming in and out. Like the buses, for instance, the one you saw where the bus is stretched out. If I'd have had that on a longer one, I would have only had lights. All I'd have had would have been lights and a blur, where I wanted to physically show you the shape and the side of the bus. So I went for a 1 second. So it does vary. It does vary. And that's just the fun and the practice of trying. Yeah.
So we're back to the bottle of gin.
Oh, good.
Mark would like to know.
No, right. Okay.
Yeah. What background did you have to capture the shadow? So what was the shadow on? Basically? Right.
Okay, so I don't know if any of you have watched my home movies when I muck around. I use a £2 tile from a tile store. Go in and ask for a sample one, get a shiny one, you know, get as big as you can. I tend to go for the black one. Don't tell Olympus, but that is a black Olympus tablecloth hanging over a background set, because these tablecloths are really good quality, and they're not see-through. I used to use a sheet. I bought a sheet from a supermarket. So when I tend to have two, I put the sheet up. But this tablecloth is so thick, and obviously Olympus is written on the other side, but we won't tell them that. And that just hangs over really nicely. And it was folded because I keep them nice. So I thought, oh, that's got no creases in it. So just a black background, all you need. Very cheap, and you don't even need the background set that I've got. You could get some string and some pegs and stuff like that. So again, you can do this really, really cheaply. That background you can set up for less than £10.
Great. Okay, so Linda gets the award for most observant person tonight, because she says that the German shot that you showed, or the shot in Germany, had changing traffic lights.
Hey!
Well spotted and well remembered.
So that would, and obviously when you think about that train, you know, that's not just one train coming in, that's a lot of trains coming in and out, you know, and, you know, and we've been to Cologne, and there's been so many times that I've stayed in the hotel above the station at Cologne, and I'm like, oh, I'd love to do that. But unfortunately, the Kolsch has always stopped me being artistic at 1 o'clock in the morning, and you probably, you know.
Yeah.
Every time I go and stay in that really dodgy hotel, it's actually not too bad hotel, I always think, oh, this would be the perfect place. You've got those beautiful arches on the bridge, and I'm always like, this would be such a good place to. 6 o'clock, hey, bedtime. So I never do it. One day I'll go back there without going to work, and I will do it one day.
Well, yes, that would be fun. I was going to make a comment about Photokina, but I'm not going to. Jenny says she's got the Pen F and the EM1 Mark II, and she missed it. She thinks, but where will she find live time, etc.?
Okay, so on older models, you look at the mode dial on the top and go to M for manual. I haven't got the glasses on, so I'm going to do this with squinty eyes. Go to M for manual. And now the back button will change your shutter speed, go all the way through to the slowest shutter speed. I have to be careful, I say that. I haven't drunk the gin. And you will get to 60 seconds. You'll go, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. And you know it's seconds because you've got the two little dots next to it and the top right-hand corner. Once you get to 60 seconds, you've got to literally dial down. Once you get to 60 seconds, you will find a bulb, live time, live comp. So yeah,
great.
And the same with the pen.
Lo says thank you very much. She does light trails in London, so sounds like you might be investing in a Olympus camera. Jackie says, how tough is an EM1 Mark II? Can you take it on can you take it backpacking without concern?
Yeah.
Get bounced around quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, bike packing, so it might be. I've interpreted that as backpacking. It might be putting
bike.
It on
Yes, is the answer. I mean, most modern cameras now are fairly well built. I mean, the joy about a smaller system is what I would do with a backpack is I tend to get those little neoprene covers. So rather than just throwing it in as it is, Optic do some. There's loads of brands out there that just do literally like a wrap. And they fit, and then you can just throw it in a backpack. Absolutely. They're weather sealed, they go to -10, they're dust proof. And the thing about Olympus systems is, and I'm gonna just do this, when you look there and you can see the sensor, normally people be freaking out going, oh my God, cover that sensor, you're gonna get it covered in dust. We don't care about that, because on our sensor is a membrane. And that membrane has, when you switch the camera on and off, has an electric current that runs through it. And that basically affects what they call the dust reduction system. And it oscillates at 30,000 times a second. And if you've got any dust on there, it pings it off. And there's a little trap in the bottom where it collects any dust and so on. The only time our sensors get dirty is if you stick your fingers in there and because obviously human hands tend to have grease on them. But we never worry about sensors. Although we do a check and clean at TPS, we're one of the brands that really don't have sensor cleaning issues because of that technology built in, and that's something we've had since 1993. Get me, Ange? Impressed?
Okay. I've just seen not backpacking. She means back rigidly attached to her bike.
So, oh yeah, as I said, same goes, exactly the same goes. They're small enough that you can have a nice neoprene wrap and just tuck them in your bag.
Okay.
Yes.
Lo says, if this very useful feature has been around a long time, she's interested to know why other brands haven't included it.
That's very interesting, isn't it? We were talking about this earlier with the fact that, we had it buried for such a long time. And I mean, I was always one of these people like, why is this feature buried? It's like so interesting. And the fact that I've shot all brands, a bit like Angela, we've sort of been around the block. I shot Nikon in my early days and Canon. I shot Olympus film cameras. And one of the reasons I joined Olympus because I absolutely loved the product. It's like that shaver guy, you know, the shaver guy who bought the company because he liked the shaver so much. So I always sort of like, you know, I always remind myself of that. But it's one of those features that I think we're actually not that bad. We're not that good at shouting about, but it is an absolutely incredible feature. And as I said, it's my job to tell everybody how brilliant it is. And as I said, and how much fun, because if you're not technically minded, and this isn't you know, sort of putting people down that aren't technical, but there's a lot of us that aren't into the numbers and the apertures and the shutter speeds and how all that technical stuff works, because the photography and cameras can get very techy, you know, we know that. But this simplifies, this gets you creating and not thinking about numbers. You know, you get instant results, you get those results really quickly and really fun and really amazingly. And it's about creation and keeping creative, not about, you know, sort of bogging yourself down with the tech stuff. You can do the tech stuff as well, but this is almost like a sort of much easier way in. And so, yeah, I think the question's really valid. Why have we not shouted about it? Because, you know, it's something that we really do need to shout about. It's brilliant tech.
Yeah, it just makes things, something that's quite tricky and confusing, easier, basically.
Yeah, and I do think we're getting better because, as I said before, it was buried in the menu, in the M button, but now we've created its own button on the top of the mode dial. So we have got a whole lot more serious about live comp and live time.
Okay. Brenda is asking, is live comp or live time listed in the menu? It's not, is it?
No, it's not listed in the menu. It's in the dial through M or in the dial through B. Yeah. What is listed in the menu is when you're actually in live comp, you've actually set that on the camera. If you're in live comp on B or M, and then you press the menu button, you will go straight into the live time or live comp menu, which allows you to set how many seconds you want that exposure for. So it's pretty easy, because once you're in live time, if you press menu, it will take you straight in there. You don't have to find it. So set live time, live comp or live time on the camera. Make sure it's on the screen. It says live time or live comp. Press menu, and then it will say how many seconds do you want that exposure for. And as I said, you can set it for 1 second right the way up to 60 seconds. So it's great because it takes you straight in there.
Oh, Wendy says she set live comp settings as a custom mode, so it's very quick to set up, basically.
Brilliant.
Nice
well
tip.
Done. 100%. That is the way forward. There are so many of those little buried things that you can assign to a function button. One of my favorites is bracketing, focus bracketing, you know, on older models. I always put that to a button because it's so frustrating to have to go in and out. On things like the latest EM1X with the bird firmware, which is coming, I've set that to the little switch on the back of the EM1X, because you don't want to have to keep going into the menu to turn it on or off. And it is just about finding those little nuances and those little shortcuts that make shooting a whole lot easier. Because the thing about any camera system is there's so many features and functions now. It's almost like all cameras for all people, but you know, that isn't always the case, you know. And like all systems, Olympus have massive menus, and it is just about making sure that you know, you get the one-to-ones and you get the ins and outs and learn what works for you. Yeah, so good tip.
Okay, we've got some thanks here for very clear explanations, and they're going to give it a go. I think that's probably live comp and or light painting, so that's great.
Brilliant.
Joy says she has a Pen F which she loves, and she's thinking of upgrading to a weatherproof Olympus camera. Which would you recommend next?
Yeah, very interesting, Joy, because the Pen F was a classic, beautiful design. I absolutely love the Pen F. I love the monochrome settings, but it was a fairly, I would say, quite a street camera. It's all about street photography because of the monochrome settings. The joy about the Pen F was its design. It has a single metal shell. There is an issue with having a single metal shell, And as much as that's beautiful in design, because if you look over your camera, there's hardly any screws. If you look at any modern camera, there's screws all over the place. So it's not aesthetically pleasing when you look close up. But the Pen F, you only have 2 screws, and that's under the thing and under, so it's beautiful. But the problem with that, of course, if to make it weather sealed, if you started to put O-rings, you would block up areas where heat would need to escape once it's powered up and once the engine's going. So we couldn't have the Pen F power weather sealed. A lot of people said, why can't you have it weather sealed? And that's why, because of the design, you couldn't have both. What I would say is, if you wanted to go weather sealed, the EM5 Mark III, and either the EM1. So not the 10, that's not weather sealed, but the EM5 Mark III, if you still want something small and neat, upwards, they're all weather sealed now.
Okay. Lo says when she shot fireworks in the past, she held a black card in front of the lens and exposed when she saw another firework. So basically take the black card away and then recover the lens. That was a very crude, practical version of live comp, but it's obviously much easier using live comp. And that was the way I used to do it as well. That's how I learned with film. And it was always very frustrating, because obviously you had to send your film away or take it to the lab and find out days later that you'd done a terrible job. Or you've got one shot that was almost right.
And I mean, how sweet digital is for the cost, you know. I mean, obviously I know it's quite a costly hobby to get into photography, but let me tell you, when you've shot 36 rolls, 36 shots of nothing, or 36 shots of out of focus, which is the worst, or the one where the film hasn't gone through the camera at all. We've all done that one, haven't we? You know, the anticipation of waiting for the shots was always very exciting, but let me tell you, when you got it wrong was very frustrating. So yeah, and you do that in Astro as well. You put the sort of dark, you take that shot, take the dark one out, and yeah, great if you know what you're doing, and brilliant, but it is that much more guesswork. You've got to think more about the technical side and about the numbers, and human reaction time is 0.5%, 0.5 seconds, right? So if you think about a football where you've got a goalie waiting to save a penalty, and the penalty taker kicks the ball, the goalie's already decided, because there isn't enough time for him to move once the ball has moved. And that's human reaction times. And this is why things like pro capture and live time are all about, because you don't have to jump on it already. Then you can be calm with your shooting, you know.
Calm. Good question from Julia. She says, in live comp, how do you change the frequency of shots?
So in live comp, it's not the frequency of shots, it's about the, so you don't, if you've got, let me show you, let me actually physically show you. So let's set up live.
Do a live demo, are you?
Da, 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 da. So in live comp, so we're now in live comp. If you press the wrong camera, if you press the menu button, that you take you straight into the amount of time that each exposure is going to be there for. So you would say 1 second, you would say 16 seconds, whatever you want, and then that's it. So that is how long each of those composite shots will then shoot for. So but it will go on until the battery dies. It will go on for either 3 hours or 6 hours. So you know, either one, whether the battery goes first or the shutter 3 hours or 6 hours, it will just keep going, and you'll see a counter, and it will just go 1, 2, 3, 4, and it will just keep going. So if after 3 hours it will, you know, you may have taken 500, 600 shots, but you won't know, because it composites them together and you only get one at the end. So it depends on how long you shoot for.
How long is the gap between, obviously, the shutter or the exposure stops and another exposure starts? How long is that gap?
So it's immediately after the last one. So you've got a 3 second exposure, it's then going to take another shot after 3 seconds, and another shot and another shot, isn't it? So it's immediate. There's no gap between one ending and one starting. No, not at all. Yeah,
because it's using the electronic shutter as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So you're not getting a curtain Well, I don't know, I did like that. You're not getting a curtain, a physical curtain closing, so you can't hear anything either. And again, you sort of think, is it going? And that's why they give you that counter on the back, so you can at least see, especially when you're shooting star trails, because obviously nothing happens for quite a while. When you're shooting traffic trails, you see things quite quickly. But when you're shooting star trails, you're like, I've been here 20 minutes and nothing's happened. Yeah, because it takes so much longer for that composite image to build up.
Okay. Marilyn says, thank you for the clear explanation. She's really looking forward to trying live comp.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Good. Can't wait to see some images.
And the salesperson in you will be very pleased to hear that Sandra is saying she's considering an Olympus for her third camera.
Yay.
Third camera. How nice. Right.
Wonderful. That's what we like to hear. Well, you know, we are a lovely bunch over at Olympus. I do consider our end users the most, well, we call them the Olympus family. We've got some really amazing people there. And so we would welcome you to our lovely family.
That's lovely to hear. So basically everybody's saying thank you very much. They're inspired. They want to give it a go. Joy has said it's a pretty thing. I think she means the Pen F, but she could mean one of us. I'm not sure. Or the gin.
Oh, or all three. Well, I'm much prettier once people have had gin, I think. But yeah, I mean, what would be great is if you've got live comp, get those images on SheClicks. You know, it's that time of year. Don't be frightened of the dark. Use it to your advantage. You know, I think we all hunker down in the winter, but actually, you know, you can create light. It is about giving yourself light in those dark times, and this is the perfect time to do it. You know, winter, we can't take pictures in winter. Absolutely you can. That's what I want to see.
So just before we go, are you able to show that video again so people can see?
Yeah, of course, I absolutely will. Let me just share the screen again. One second. I don't want to sing to you because that's really bad. I do that a lot. Let me just go up to the video itself. It's at the top. So yeah, as I said, the first little section is live time, and you can see that because it blows out really quickly. From current slide, here we go. So the first section, 2, 3, it just keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. And that refreshes 24 times depending on your ISO, and the histogram's moving up. But you'd need a filter. This is the joy about lifetime. You definitely need a filter in front of that one.
Yeah.
Live composite. Here we go. Because live composite, you know, again, just sort of keeps, can you see there that it's telling you it's 1 second, it's 5 seconds, and it's telling you how many images it's shooting. Obviously that's speeded up quite a bit, but you can see that it's, yeah. But the histogram is with the joy of it, and I'll play that again. So again, look at the histogram, and it's a lot to take in because you're seeing two different things in one go. The lifetime thing works in a slightly different way. As I said, you've only got a maximum refresh of 24 times, but the live comp just keeps going and going and going. And so they both do have their uses. And as I said, just be warned that that's sped up slightly. But as I said, it's about looking at the trails and the fact that the buildings aren't blown out and the histogram. And once you see all those three things, you're like, oh yeah, how cool is that?
That's great. Thank you very much. Everyone's really enjoyed your webinar, and there's lots of people saying thank you. They found it really interesting. And I think there's going to be a lot of people going out in the dark, waving around torches and lights and waiting for cars to go by and all sorts of stuff. So thank you very much. That's been really...
You're more than welcome. For safety, get yourself a head torch if you're going out, because there's nothing worse. Make sure you've got a torch on you, because it's just be safe out there. But I really look forward to seeing some stuff on the SheClicks Facebook page and the Instagram, and hopefully, you know, we've inspired you a little tiny bit to get creative and get colourful.
I think you have. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for having me. See you again. Take care.